Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shayantani Pal, Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today our paper is on the social and cultural history of India, and today we will discuss on a specific subject, that is the society and culture under the Guptas. Now, as you know, the Guptas were a very powerful and dominant rulers of early India. All of us know about the Guptas from our school books, and they controlled a large part of North India from the 4th to the 5th century CE. So here today we will discuss about the society and culture under the Guptas. So here are our learning objectives. We shall study the society from the account of Faxian. Now this Faxian was a Chinese traveller who came during the rule of Chandragupta II. So he discussed the daily life, the society which he saw. So we will study first the account of Faxian. Then we shall study the differences between the norms and the actual practice. This I will explain later. Then we shall study about the royal women, the urban life, the education. There are subsections on educations. We shall discuss about the astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, then the concepts of time, which is very important, and then Sanskrit literature and medical knowledge, the development of all these branches of knowledge during the Gupta period. And then we shall study the religious development, which is another important aspect of the Gupta culture, and then we shall study architecture and sculpture, which is again very important during the period of the Guptas. So here you can see a map of the Gupta Empire, and as you can see, the colored part covers the large portions of North India. So the Guptas, who had their capital in Magadha, in Patliputra, in the kingdom of Magadha in South Bihar, they controlled a very large part of North India during their rule. So the Gupta period. Now the culture of the Gupta period has variously regarded as the golden age of India. Now what is the concept of golden age? By golden age we mean something brilliant happened, something very extraordinary happened. So in this module we shall discuss whether this type of development took place in the Gupta period and whether the Gupta period can be regarded as a golden age of Indian history. And then again the Gupta period is again regarded as the classical age. Now what is the classical age? Classical is the period which actually sets the norms, the standards which are followed in the subsequent period. So we shall also analyze whether the Gupta period in respect of culture, it had set certain norms which were to be followed in the subsequent period. Now it is believed that the political peace secured by the Gupta dynasty produced an unparalleled urbanity in which art, religion, literature, so different branches, different aspects of life could develop, and they reached a classical perfection. Now the concept of the golden age is basically concerned with a high level of standard achieved in the field of Sanskrit literature, art, architecture. So the concept of the golden age is not applicable to the all aspects of daily life. They are not applicable to the peasants, they are not applicable to the daily life of ordinary common folk. So the concept of golden age is only applicable for certain aspects of life like literature, like language, etc. Now the society, now we shall discuss about the society, the developments that took place in the society under the Guptas. Now as I have already told you that Faxian, the Chinese traveller, came to visit the court during the period of Chandragupta II, which is in the 4th century CE. Now these Chinese travellers, you know about the name of several Chinese travellers who visited India, like Xuanzang, who is also very famous, but he came later. Now these Chinese travellers, both Faxian, Xuanzang, why did they came to India? They came to India to visit the monasteries, to study Buddhism in the monasteries. Now Nalanda is a very famous monastery during the Gupta period. So they came into India to study about Buddhism, and they stayed for several years, maybe 30 years, maybe 40 years in these monasteries, and they copied the manuscripts and they brought these manuscripts to their own country where people got to read them. So these Chinese travelers actually in course of their visit to several monasteries, they visited several sections of the society. So they are very different from the Greek ambassadors like Megasthenes, who were only acquainted with a limited section of the society, the royal court. The Chinese travelers actually talked with different sections of the people of the society, so they were very familiar regarding the Indian society. So we can get a very reliable account of the society under a specific period from the account of the Chinese travelers. Now this Faxian, he refers to an idealized Indian society in the 5th century. What does he say? He says that the people were led a very peaceful life. They did not have to register their household to any magistrate. There were complete peace prevailing throughout the empire. So this is a very idealized picture of the Indian society which Faxian presented. He says that the inhabitants of Patliputra were very rich and prosperous. Now this is the general impression which Faxian gives regarding Madhya Desha. What is Madhya Desha? Madhya Desha consists of the Gangetic Valley. So he says that the peoples of Patliputra is the capital of the Gupta Empire, and also the people of Madhya Desha were very rich and prosperous. So he draws a picture of mutual admiration between the Buddhists and the Brahmanas. As he goes on, he tells us a story regarding a procession which used to take place on certain occasions. This procession was by the Buddhists. They used to carry certain images to the capital, and Faxian says that these processions led by the Buddhists carrying the images of Buddha and Bodhisattva were actually welcomed by the Brahmanas staying inside the capital. So he wants to say that there was a completely a relationship of mutual admiration which existed between the Brahmanas and the Buddhists in the Gupta period. Now in this map you can see the route of Faxian, who covered an extensive route for his travel from China to India. He started his journey from China, and then he traveled through Central Asia, then the northwestern section of the Indian subcontinent. He entered India, and then he traveled extensively through Madhya Desha. He came to the Gupta capital Patliputra and visited the court of Chandragupta II. Then he straight away went to Sri Lanka, and wherefrom he returned to his own country. So this is a very extensive area through which Faxian actually traveled, and so he has told us a lot of things regarding the society during the period of the Guptas. Now Faxian's account suggests that vegetarianism was practiced in India during the Gupta period. This is actually true for the area through which he traveled. As you have already seen in the map that he has not traveled throughout the whole of India. He didn't go to the south of the Vindhyas. So he did not know regarding the society existing to the south of the Vindhyas. So all the statements of Faxian are actually applicable to the area of Madhya Desha, which largely covers North India to the north of the Vindhyan mountain. Now, however, although he suggests that vegetarianism was practiced in India, that is North India, there are evidence to suggest that meat eating was actually practiced among the elite people in the Gupta period. Now, slavery. The Dharma Shastras of this period elaborately deals with the slaves. What are the Dharma Shastras? The Dharma Shastras are actually beginning with the law books of Manu. Earlier these works were actually called as law, but by the European authors. But later it was understood that these were actually not laws. These were actually certain norms which had been set by the Brahmana authors as they viewed society in their own way. So these texts are called actually normative texts, which begin from the period of the Manu Samhita in the 2nd century BC. Now, the Dharma Shastras of the Gupta period elaborately deals with the slaves. Now, why did they elaborately deals with the slaves? Because slavery has become more common in the society. So, they have dealt elaborately with the slaves. The largest number of the slaves must have been domestic slaves. So, they were appointed to work on the various household chores. So, actually there was a problem of untouchability in ancient India, and there were some untouchables who were not allowed to work inside the household. So, what were they doing? They were actually working as hired laborers in the fields with the peasants. So, there are several aspects, several forms of slavery which actually existed in the Gupta period, and about which the Dharma Shastras dealt very elaborately. So, the untouchables were prevented from carrying on domestic works, and they formed the category of landless labor. Now, the attitude towards women as reflected in the Dharma Shastras. As I have already told that the Dharma Shastras actually set the norms. It is not always true that what norms are set, they were always practiced in the society. So, now let us see what is the attitude of these Dharma Shastra authors towards women. In literature and arts, the women were idealized. How they were idealized? That Manu always say that the women should be a perfect wife, and he should bear a son. So, these are the things which women should do. So, this is a very idealized image of the women which is presented in the Dharma Shastras. Now, what do they say? They had to conform to the male ideals. What are the male ideals? Actually, these ideals were set by the men, the Brahmana authors. So, these are the male ideals of perfect women, and this reduced them actually to a very subordinate position, since they had to listen to this, they had to comply with these norms. Now, the upper class women received education but were not permitted to take part in discussion. This is very curious, because elite women in the royal household or in household of the wealthy people, they got education, they were efficient in different branches of knowledge, but whenever any philosophical discussion or any educational discussion used to take place, the women were never allowed to take part in those discussions. Their access to property and inheritance was also limited. This is also again another aspect of the Dharma Shastra's norms. Now, early marriages, often pre-puberty marriages, were advocated by the Shastric authors. The earliest evidence of the practice of sati is recorded in the Aaron inscription of 510 AD. Now, this place Aaron is actually in the Madhya Pradesh, and this inscription records that Bhanugupta, who is a Gupta officer, he actually died in battle, and his wife performed the sati custom. So, this is the earliest inscription which records that the practice of sati was prevalent in India in the 6th century, in the early 6th century. Now, the elite women, we shall discuss about the position of the elite women in the society. Who were the elite women? The elite women are the women of the royal, obviously of the royal household, and also the wives of merchants and the other wealthy people who existed in the society. These elite women were taught the Shastras, as I have already discussed. They were taught 64 branches of knowledge that should be learnt, 64 branches of knowledge. Among these 64 branches of knowledge were solving riddles, reciting from books, knowledge of poetics, metres and lexicons. So, you can see there is a very detailed system of education of the elite women that existed in the society. The Sanskrit dramas, they also suggest that women associated with the royal court must have skills in reading, writing, singing, dancing and so on. So, the women were educated in various arts so that they can do certain things in the royal court. Now, we shall discuss another aspect of society, that is the social mobility. the social mobility, a case of social mobility is actually recorded in the Mandasor inscription. This is a very interesting inscription which comes from Mandasor in the Madhya Pradesh. It records that a guild of silk weavers, they were originally residing in Lata. The Lata country is in southern Gujarat. They moved from this Lata country to Mandasor. The ancient name of Mandasor, as recorded in the inscription, is Dashapura. So this guild of silk weavers actually moved from their original place Lata to Mandasor. Why did they move? Because the guild of the trade of silk weaving most probably declined. So they had to give up their profession and they had to move to a new city, that is Dashapura. There some of them, they had to change their profession also, since the silk trade was on the silk weaving trade was on the decline. So they adopted some new professions, that of archer, that of soldier, that of bards, that of scholars. So some of these professions were definitely higher than that of a silk weaver. So this is a case of social mobility, a case of social mobility to the higher scale as recorded in the Mandasor inscription. Now we can see certain pictures of royal women as represented on the coins of the Guptas. As you know, you are familiar with the gold coins of the Guptas, which have a very high artistic merit. So the upper the picture on the top is that of this coin is called the Chandragupta Kumaradevi type of coin. On one side of the coin we have two figures. One is that of King Chandragupta, most probably Chandragupta the first, and he is giving something, perhaps some kind of present to his queen, who is actually a Licchavi princess. Now these Licchavis were a very ancient tribe of Nepal. Chandragupta is presenting something to his princess, who is known as Kumaradevi. So this is a portrayal of the queen in the coin of the Guptas. Now why the Licchavi princess, who later became the wife of Chandragupta the first, was given so much importance that she was represented in the Gupta coin? Because the Licchavis were very powerful and they were also instrumental in the emergence of the Guptas. So this also, through this marriage alliance of the Guptas with the Licchavis, the social status and also the wealth of the Guptas also they developed to a high place. So this Licchavi marriage was very important in the rise of the Guptas. So the separate coin was issued to record and commemorate this event. In the lower part you can see the Ashwamedha gold coin of Samudragupta. The Ashwamedha sacrifice was performed by Samudragupta. It was a mark of sovereignty, and on other side of the coin you can see the queen who is coming with the Chauri, and she is coming to take part in the royal sacrifice. She has a very important role to play in this Ashwamedha sacrifice. So she is portrayed on the coin. So in both the cases you can see that royal women were actually represented in the coins when they had certain role to play in certain rituals. So these are the cases in which royal women were presented on the coins of the Guptas. Now the differences between norms and actual practice. So as I have already told you that there are certain differences between the norms and actual practice. Since norms were set by the Brahmana authors of the Dharma Shastras, the things it is not necessary that this will be followed by the people in the society. So there existed certain differences between the norm and the practice in the society. Now we are moving to another section, the urban life during the Gupta period, regarding which we have some data from certain authors. It has been assumed that from the Gupta period, the urban centers were on the decline due to the feudalization of the state and economy and the decline of trade and commerce. So now we will discuss whether really the urban centers were on the decline during the Gupta period. The daily life of a well-off citizen who is called a Nagaraka. Who is a Nagaraka? A Nagaraka is a city dweller. He has been described in the Kamasutra Vatsyayana, and it indicates that the comforts of a city life was not altogether lost in the Gupta period. Here is the ruins of the ancient city of Patliputra, which is now preserved in the place called Kumrahar near the city of Patna. Now, the daily life of a city dweller as described in the Kamasutra of Vatsyayana. What does Vatsyayana say? He says, when an educated man enters the householder stage of life and has enough money, he begins the lifestyle of a Nagaraka. Now the text goes on to describe the house of a Nagaraka with a well furnished bedroom which is provided with toiletries like perfume, oil, garlands, etc. And how was the daily life of the Nagaraka? The bedroom of the Nagaraka should also have musical instruments and pencils for drawing, boards for dice and gambling. And the Kamasutra also described how the Nagaraka gets ready in the morning by applying fragrant oil and by chewing betel leaf. He takes bath daily and spends the afternoon by teaching his birds to speak as well as taking a short nap. In the evening, he goes to salon. Salon is explained as goshti, the gathering, and he takes part in music and singing. On certain days, he joins an assembly of invited guests at the temple of goddess Saraswati. Often he takes part in a goshti where thoughts on poems or works of art are exchanged between the learned Nagarakas. So this is a life of the Nagaraka, the daily life of the Nagaraka as described by Vatsyayana, from which we get the impression that urban life was very much important during the Gupta period. So we can always speak against a theory which says that the urban centers were on the decline during the Gupta period. Now we shall move on to discuss the education, the developments that took place in various branches of education in the Gupta period. Now, formal education. The formal education were imparted by the ashramas together with the Buddhist and Jain monasteries. However, in the case of the ashramas, the education was always restricted among the upper castes. As you see, the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, they were and also the Vaishyas, they were allowed to be educated inside the ashramas, but the Shudras were never allowed to go to any ashrama. Now, the technical knowledge. Varahamihira, who is a famous author of the Brihat Samhita, he discussed certain aspects of agricultural practices, including cultivation of new crops such as indigo. Indigo is a very important crop which came to be cultivated during the Gupta period, and the effects of rainfall etc. on the cultivation. Now, the astronomy and mathematics. Interaction with the Hellenistic world. Hellenistic world means the Greek people, the Greek world, had introduced new systems into the Indian astronomy. In 499 CE, Aryabhata was the first astronomer to calculate pi to 3 and the length of the solar year to 365, which is very close to modern day calculation of astronomy. Aryabhata believed that the earth was a sphere and rotated on its axis. The shadow of the earth falling on the moon causes the eclipses. So this explanation by Aryabhata is far removed than what had been explained in Vedic astronomy, which said that actually planets got swallowed by Rahu. So the eclipse happened. Now, so Aryabhata was far removed in regarding his explanation of a solar eclipse. Varahamihira also showed interest in horoscopy. Pancha Siddhantra of Varahamihira discussed the 5 schools of astronomy. 2 of them reflected a close knowledge to the Hellenistic astronomy. Now, interaction with the Arab world, which is again very important. There was increasing interaction since the Arab traders were coming to the west coast of India, and the Arabs were also writing accounts on the geography of India. So interaction with the Arab world became very important. There was increasing interaction regarding astronomy and mathematics. Brahmagupta, an astronomer and a mathematician of the late 6th 7th century, was the author of Brahma Sphuta Siddhanta and Khanda Khadyaka. They had been translated into Arabic, and thus they introduced the Indian astronomy to the Arabs. Now the name Hindasa, this is very important because the name adopted in Arabian for numerals is Hindasa, which is actually derived from the term Hind, meaning Hindustan. So it appears that actually the Arabs, they got the knowledge of numerals from the Indians. So they named the numerals as Hindasa. Now the branches of philosophy. There were well defined philosophical systems numbering to 6. These are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa and Vedanta. However, these branches actually had their origin earlier than the Gupta period, but it is only in the Gupta period that these different principles of these schools of philosophy actually took their final shape. The concepts of time. There were two concepts regarding cyclic time, that of Mahayuga and Manvantara. A cycle was called a kalpa. According to the Manvantara theory, the cycle has 14 Manvantaras, which are actually lengthy intervals between them. At the end of each, the universe is recreated when Manu is actually the primeval man, he becomes the king. Again, in the Mahayoga concept, there are 4 yugas: the Krita or the Satya, the Treta, the Dvapara and the Kali. Kali is the last yuga within which we are living today. The decline is associated with the decline in the quality of life. So what they wanted to say, that the quality of life reached its highest level in the Krita age, and then it gradually declined with the passage of time. The idea of linear time, which is very different from the idea of cyclic time, which I have analyzed. The idea of linear time was nevertheless used for recounting the past or making historical claims related to the present. The genealogies created by the Puranas for the heroes and dynasties from the past followed this concept of linear time. The use of regnal years. Regnal years are counted in terms of how many years a king has ruled. These are called the regnal years, and eras also reflect the same concept. There are several eras current in ancient India, like the Vikrama era, the Gupta era, etc. Now we are moving on to discuss the development in literature. Sanskrit literature, which is very important in the Gupta period. Kalidasa is a famous poet, all of us know about him. He has been regarded as one of the most brilliant playwrights. His dramas, the Avijnana Shakuntalam, the Malavikagnimitram and so on, these are very important. Similarly important are his lyrical poems like the Raghuvangsha, the Kumara Sambhava, the Meghaduta. The other famous playwrights like Bhasa, Shudraka, Bharavi, they also flourished during this period. Again, there are certain important developments regarding the major Puranas. What are the major Puranas? That is the Vishnu Purana, the Vayu Purana. All of these Puranas, they were written, the writing of these Puranas began much earlier, but all of these Puranas took their final shape during the Gupta period. The same is the case for the Dharma Shastras also, which I have already discussed, that the Dharma Shastras also took their final shape during the Gupta period. Then another important work, the Niti Sara of Kamandaka. This is a work on statecraft. This also belongs to the Gupta period. So there are very important developments that took place in the field of Sanskrit literature in the Gupta period. Now we will go on to discuss the development in the field of medical knowledge. The earliest surviving texts on Ayurveda are the Charaka and the Sushruta Samhitas. Now the origin of the Charaka Samhita may go back far earlier to the 3rd or 2nd century BCE. The Charaka Samhita deals with certain subjects like pharmacology, food, certain diseases and the treatments, the doctors, the anatomy, the embryology. There are several subjects on which the Charaka Samhita discusses. The Sushruta Samhita is essentially associated with the science of surgery, and it was finally edited by the 5th century CE, that is in the Gupta period. Now, there is the next section we shall discuss about the religious development that took place during the Gupta period. Now, there are several religions, Buddhism, Jainism, the Brahmanical religions like Vaishnavism, Shaivism, etc. The period witnessed the developments of a range of religions. Now, Buddhism often had confrontations with Shaivism, Jainism. The Jainism received support from the merchant communities of Western India and the rulers of Karnataka. The Jainas also developed a series of icons of Mahavira and the Jaina teachers. The development of icons is actually not only associated with Jainism but also Buddhism and also the Brahmanical religions. So, the development of icons of gods and goddesses is a very important development that took place in the Gupta period. The female deities, they become the nucleus of a number of rites that were incorporated within Tantrism. The cult of Devi, which becomes all encompassing during the Gupta period. Now, this cult of Devi, this actually originated from the cult of the mother goddess, which is very ancient. It belongs to the period of the Harappan civilization, when we find the terracotta models of several mother goddess. So, mother goddess were actually being worshipped by a section of the society, but now in the Gupta period we find that this concept of mother goddess, this cult of mother goddess is actually incorporated within the cult of Devi, and they were now adopted by the Brahmanical authors who give them a place in their Dharma Shastras. So, the cult of Devi becomes very important in the Gupta period. Devi represented Shakti of Shiva. Temples dedicated to yoginis were very popular in the central India. Worship of the consorts of male deities like Lakshmi, the consort of Vishnu, Parvati, Kali, Durga, the various consorts of Shiva became very popular during the Gupta period. The tantric beliefs also influenced Buddhism. Tantrism is a very important development. Tantrism means something very mysterious, which is not at all intelligible to the common people. So, the tantric rites are very complex, and it is not only Buddhism, it is several religions which were actually influenced by the tantric beliefs. Vajrayana, which is a new school of Buddhism, it also developed in Eastern India during the Gupta period. The female counterparts were added to the existing male Buddhist deities. They were known as Tara and they were saviors. There were several aspects of Tara like the Shamotara, then the other Taras who became very important in Buddhism. Buddhism, however, had a diminishing support from some of the rulers of this period, and you will see that later at a later period Buddhism only remained in Kashmir, and in Eastern India from other parts of India it actually vanished. Images emerged and as the central object of worship, and they superseded the Vedic sacrifices. So, now this is very important development, because since the rituals centering the sacrifice declined, now the priest is not so much important in religion. So, the loss of importance of the priest in the system of worship as contrasted to his role in the Vedic sacrifices gradually led to the development of bhakti, which is the devotional worship. Bhakti is the bond between the worshipper and the god. So, in this relationship the priest has a very limited role, which he had a more important role in the performance of the Vedic sacrifices. The Gupta kings developed Garuda, the mount of Vishnu, as their emblem. They called them Parama Bhagavatas in their inscriptions. So, they followed the Vaishnava religion. Pancharatra, it is an important Vaishnava tradition which combines devotionalism towards Vishnu with ascetic and yogic elements, and non-injury formed a very important part of the Vaishnava religion in the Gupta period. Now we shall discuss regarding the developments of art and architecture in the Gupta period. Temple architecture had its beginning in the Gupta period, which is very important in the history of temple architecture in ancient India. The structures, however, were of very modest type, as I will show you in a slide. These are very different from the richly decorated temples of the later period. This is a temple of the Gupta period, the temple number 17 at Sanchi. It stands on a low molded basement. It consists of a flat roofed square sanctum with a portico supported on four pillars in the front. So it is a remarkable piece of Gupta architecture which is noted for its structural propriety and its symmetry. The logical proportions and it is very restrained in its ornamentation, as I have already told you that these Gupta period temples are of very modest shape and they are not like the elaborately decorated temples of the later period. Now the developments in the sculpture. The Buddha images from Sarnath, Mathura and Bodh Gaya reflect a very high aesthetic sensibility and they are noted for their serene spirituality. The icons of Vaishnava and Shaiva deities were equally impressive. The deities were built in human form, but their images were more symbolic. Thus, they used to have 4 to 8 arms carrying several attributes. The Vaishnava deities often represented the varying incarnations of Vishnu. Shiva was often represented by a lingam. Thus, making of images of deities marked a departure from Vedic Brahmanism that excluded the making of deities. Images were built in stone, metal as also in terracottas. This is a Buddha from Sarnath and you can see the serene expression as reflected in his closed eyes and also in his lips. The Sarnath Buddha is very famous for this spiritual reflection. The Mathura art, this actually incorporated more Indian elements. Earlier it was Greek elements which influenced the Mathura art, but during the Gupta period it incorporated the Gupta elements. The Ajanta cave paintings, the art of Ajanta, all of us are very familiar with the cave paintings of Ajanta, but there is an issue that how much role did the Guptas actually had to play in the development of paintings at Ajanta. It has been suggested that actually the art of Ajanta represents a separate style which can be called the Vidarbha Vakataka idiom, and it is very different from the Gupta art style. This is a cave painting at Ajanta representing the miracle at Shavasti. Now we come to the summary portion of our lecture. As you can see, we go back to the same question that the Gupta period definitely reached a very high level in terms of its cultural productions, particularly in the field of Sanskrit literature and sculptural art. Still, as we know that classical actually sets the standard for the subsequent ages, this notion regarding the Gupta age has now been regarded as inadequate. Why is it inadequate? Since the normal people, we do not know whether the normal people were leading a very happy life. So, whether we can call the Gupta period as golden age, this is very difficult to regard the Gupta period as a golden age, since the peasants, the normal people, the common folk, they were not very happy. A lot of taxes were used to put on them and they were living under pressure. So, at the conclusion, we can only say that the concept of golden age is actually applicable only to the field of literature and arts in the Gupta period, but in the case of the daily life of the normal people, we can never regard the Gupta period as a golden age. Thank you.